It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Earnings after the bell from Applied Materials. Shares are lower by roughly 3%. AMAT, which is the largest American maker of chip manufacturing equipment, delivered a disappointing revenue forecast, signaling that some semiconductor customers may be holding off on orders. Right now, we got Applied Materials after hours down by about 3.8%. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon says companies will be looking harder at acquisitions in the wake of the Trump victory after regulation had chilled deal activity.
A lot of M&A was stymied by the fact it's not just sometimes you can't get through the courts or something like that, but it takes 2 years. It takes 3 years. So make believe you're a bank, and we've seen this happen. And one of these deals actually took 3 years. It takes 3 years to get it done. So you've done a deal, it's binding, you haven't closed it, but now you've got to run the company.
Jamie Dimon speaking with Bloomberg's Lisa Abramowitz at the APEC Summit in Lima, Peru. Earlier in the day, Trump said in a post on Truth Social that Dimon will not be invited to be part of his upcoming administration. It was a down day today for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. S&P slumped 36, down by about 0.6%. The S&P ending the session at 59.49. Dow Industrials down 207, down 0.5%. NASDAQ down 123, a drop there of 0.6%. Today, the 10-year 4.44%, the 2-year 3.35%. Spot gold at 25.65, drop there of 0.3%, and West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.2%, 68.59. And to be clear, on the 2-year, 4.35%. And President-elect Donald Trump says he is tapping Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to run the Department of Health and Human Services, a move that would elevate a prominent vaccine skeptic and pharmaceutical industry critic to the top role on federal health policy. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hey, thanks so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. Do appreciate it. Well, we are getting, Carol, to the tail end of earnings season. It means one thing.
Retailers.
Yeah, retailers. Next week, we're going to hear from Walmart, Lowe's, Target, Williams-Sonoma, TJX Companies, American Eagle, among others.
Yeah, we know Abby Roach will be watching all of this so closely. She's portfolio analyst for the Empiric LT equity team at Allspring Global Investments. She covers the consumer staples, the consumer discretionary sectors, and she's joining us from Washington, D.C. Abby, good to have you here with us. We do want to start, though, with tariffs, because we spoke to Erica York, a senior economist over at the Tax Foundation. That was earlier this week. They've got a new study out that says if implemented in 2025, tariffs could lead to thousands of dollars of increased costs for U.S. households. How are you looking at it?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think, we've been watching it from two ways, both the potential impact for consumers and also the potential impact for retailers. And I think it's been really interesting thus far for the couple of retailers that have reported, just hearing the plans to be able to help minimize the impact of the potential tariffs. And it remains to be seen whether the bark is worse than the bite, but companies are definitely preparing right now to be able to, and they have been during the last administration, to be able to diversify the supply chain, to be able to use their scale to help to mitigate the cost for the end consumer ultimately.
How does it affect the companies that you cover so closely? I mean, how does it affect the retailers that we're going to hear from next week? A lot of these companies are selling a lot of stuff made in China.
They are. And, the great thing is they have experience. They were able to diversify the supply chain previously to be able to move some of those goods through different countries. And what we heard from retailers prior to earnings and then throughout earnings is just that work isn't just starting, post the election. They were preparing for it prior to the election, looking for different ways to be able to diversify where they're getting goods from. And they're continuing to do a lot of that work. And, we heard from Home Depot earlier this week, just talk about the fact that they can use their scale to their advantage. And we think we'll continue to see retailers do that.
Tell us about the global supply chains. I feel like, we have been talking to a lot of guests over the last few months about more nearshoring, onshoring. But what are we really seeing in terms of how global supply chains are changing?
Yeah, I think, they continue to be diversified. And I think...
What does that mean, though? Is it different lower cost markets overseas rather than China specifically, which we've been seeing a movement away, or is it actually bringing it back home?
It's a little bit of both. I think what we've heard thus far, I mean, Vietnam has been an area that's been highlighted of moving goods through Vietnam instead of through China. So I think certainly we have heard some of that for companies that are more exposed to China, but also the US piece of it too for those companies that are able to do so. So I think it's a little bit of both for right now, but what we've heard is companies are looking at all the different options out there to be able to lower their cost and be able to create more different areas where they're getting goods from.
Are they going to successfully be able to do that in a short period of time? Did they make these changes fast enough during the last Trump administration? Are they doing nearshoring enough? I mean, one thing we learned is it's pretty unpredictable what the president-elect had done in the past, and it caught a lot of companies off their toes.
It did. No, I agree. And I think it seems like now relative to 4 years ago, I think, or to 8 years ago, excuse me, it seems like there's more planning that's been going on. And I think there's a lot more situational analysis that's been going on. I think a lot of the comments that we've heard from the different companies are more higher level, really, versus anything, maybe specific details that they're giving to us. But from what I've heard previously, I think they've done a better job of looking at different ways to be able to best benefit versus just with status quo and hoping that this won't come to fruition.
So let's talk about some of the earnings that you might be watching out for next week, or that you think our audience should be watching very closely, and why.
Yeah, I think one of the ones, a number of the big names reporting next week, one that we're definitely going to be watching for, both Walmart and Target. I think it will be interesting to see both of those names report, particularly from a Target standpoint, is a name that we're excited to see too. I think is a name that will benefit if we get a more risk-on environment, given they're more exposed from a discretionary standpoint, whereas Walmart obviously more exposed to, needs-based staples items. So watching those two names closely to get a read on the consumer, just to hear how the consumer is holding up, and particularly from a margin standpoint too, on the Target side of things, but also just the continued discussion from companies about their supply chains and any incremental color that we can get in terms of specific actions that they're taking, as well as anything they're seeing from the consumer standpoint with respect to the health of the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely crucial. I just got to point out, Walmart's up 60% here in 2024. We're looking at a forward-looking PE of about 34. Target is up just shy of 8%, and it's got a forward-looking PE of about 16. It feels like Walmart, though, from an investment perspective, is getting a bit oversold, if not already oversold. I'm just pulling up RSI on it. Yeah, it's definitely an oversold position. So is there a possibility that even if it comes in line, that there could be some disappointment, just considering the run-up that we've seen in this name?
Absolutely. I think that's always a risk, and particularly, as you pointed out, the strength that stock has seen this year. I think some of the, will be interesting, anything that they have to say around the consumer, particularly anything more cautious that they have to say around the consumer. But in terms of the upside, I think everything that they've been doing with respect to the digital platform and some of the gains that they've been able to get from some of those middle to higher income consumers, I think that could be a catalyst to the upside for the name, given that's been a strength that they've seen this year.
Hey, just want to end asking about McDonald's, but specifically in the context that RFK Jr. has been announced as Secretary of Health and Human Services, at least as a nomination. The president-elect saying that the HHS will play a big role in helping ensure that everybody will be protected from pharmaceutical products and food additives that have contributed to the overwhelming health crisis in this country. It's kind of strange because we know Trump loves McDonald's. RFK Jr. does not like processed food. How should we look at this if you're an investor in McDonald's?
Yeah, we think, it's certainly something to watch short term, but we think it's more short-term noise versus anything that impacts the longer-term fundamentals for McDonald's. And it's certainly a risk in any commentary that comes out of that. But one of the things that we look for, and we include McDonald's in this, is like truly high-quality companies that generate excess free cash flow relative to their peers. And we don't think that this headline is going to impact McDonald's ability to do that. And we think that they can look through, and then other investors can look through some of the short-term noise, because we don't think it changes the fundamentals or their ability to continue to grow free cash flow over the long term.
Abby, thanks so much. We're going to leave it there. Abby Roach, she's portfolio analyst for the Empiric LT equity team over at Allspring Global Investments, joining us from Washington, D.C. Remember, a few weeks ago, Trump was in a McDonald's serving French fries, and now RFK Jr. is nominated to be Secretary of HHS.
It's one of those instances where to be a fly on the wall in the White House. Just saying.
I think we'll have a few of those over the next 4 years.
I do indeed. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stennebeck on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. And what would you like to hear about on Bloomberg Radio? Help make shows like ours even better by taking our Bloomberg audience survey. Visit youtube.com/Bloomberg Podcast and click the link in our profile or community section to take the survey. It's hosted by our partners at Material. Fill it out now at youtube.com/Bloomberg Podcast or just click that QR code if you're watching us on YouTube or Bloomberg Originals.
All right, good stuff.
Did I say click the QR code? Take a picture of the QR code with your phone.
Yeah. You know how it works.
Yeah.
It's like when you want to eat at a restaurant.
Cool.
You click on the
I'm hip.
QR code.
Take a picture of it.
Oh, you are definitely hip.
Yes.
That's for sure.
Scan. You scan it, Elizabeth tells me. You scan. Thank you, Elizabeth. You
Well,
scan the QR
you know who's
code.
hip is Elizabeth,
I know.
because she knows how to scan a QR code.
I know.
Unlike Tim, who clicks on a QR code. Hey, you know who's really kind of hip? Is Martha Stewart. Her new documentary showcases her rise, fall, and redemption. And that is inspiring viewers to take action and appreciate the value of doing and mastering skills. And I'm curious if that's what's happened for our own Amanda Mole, who watched Martha, the new Netflix documentary on the famed and really iconic domestic doyenne, Martha Stewart. Amanda is Bloomberg's senior reporter for Bloomberg Business Week. She joins us from New York. So was the documentary a good thing? I had to ask.
Yes, absolutely. I am not always a huge fan of streaming service documentaries. Some of them can be kind of duds. And I was nervous this one might be kind of a dud, but it's fantastic. I loved it.
Okay, tell us why.
Well, You got a really rare thing in this documentary, I think, which is a celebrity that gave a documentary film crew like full access. RJ Cutler got full access to her archives. She provided a bunch of photos. She sat for extensive interviews, but she didn't have final cut. The filmmakers themselves got to decide what would happen. She was a collaborator. She was a contributor on the documentary. She provided copious feedback to the film crew, but then the director got to decide ultimately what happened with it. And Martha hasn't been overly thrilled with the results. She's given some interviews about the documentary, but the end product itself is very, very good, and it's very, very also on brand for Martha not to like the documentary itself.
So can you explain that tension, like the tension with her giving full access and full control of the final cut, but still participating, and then at the same time not being so happy with the result? What's the tension there?
I think there's enormous tension. I came out of the documentary respecting Martha more because obviously she, even before you've watched the documentary, if you followed anything about her career, you know that she is a perfectionist. You know that she cares a great deal about details, about how things are presented, about how she presents herself. And to go into a project where she is like explicitly and legally giving up control over how she's portrayed and how her story is told to a third party, where she can't stop the results from being broadcast, I think that is like a part of her personality that her audience respects a lot, because clearly she understands that like documentary filmmakers and journalists and whoever are also trying to do a job that they care about the details of and may have different ideas. And it has clearly not thrilled her with how things came out. But I think that going into it and giving someone else control was probably a pretty big deal and probably made for a much better documentary in the end.
I kind of agree. I've done 2 different moderated conversations, just one-on-one with her. And I have to say they were a lot of fun. But she is used to be in control. You know what I mean? And so there is that awareness. But, if you've seen anything she's been involved with, she's very, very much in control. Having said that, what's a wild, Amanda? I think about this a lot because she used to have a show on CBS years ago, over 20, 25, 30 years ago, that was closely watched. She had a magazine. You could buy her products. I've bought things. My mom had bought things. But what's interesting is that you think about the influencers that are out there. She was kind of like early in on that, right? In terms of creating a lifestyle.
She definitely, I think the best way to phrase it would be that today's influencers owe her a debt. Yeah. Because she really created the blueprint for how you present like a fully realized vision of a lifestyle and a way of living and a way of being to the general public in a way that, you're not just a food star. You're not just you don't just know about gardening or cleaning or whatever else. You have this fully realized and fully diversified brand. And I think that a lot of today's influencers aspire toward that and want that for themselves. I think that largely, though, what is so impressive about Martha is that she was actually exceptional enough and is exceptional enough to pull all of that off. I think a lot of people do not have quite the juice for that. Even if they want to do it. And so I really came away from the documentary reminded of Michael Jordan in The Last Dance and his sort of like obsessive perfectionism, his competitive drive, his
we'll see
desire.
We'll see if we get the memes. We'll see if we get the memes from this one too, Amanda. Hey, really appreciate you joining us. That's Amanda Mull, Bloomberg senior reporter for Bloomberg Business Week, joining us from New York.
All right, we do have some breaking news. President-elect Donald Trump announcing his intention to nominate former SEC Chairman Jay Clayton to be the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. So continuing to build out his team, and this certainly gets into the legal aspects, right, in terms of legal actions that will come down potentially during his administration. That's a big post. We know a lot goes through here, certainly here in New York City, something the president-elect is certainly familiar with, so interesting to see, but continuing to build out his team. Hey guys, that's going to do it for us, the Thursday edition from Tim and me.